Representative Walker, is that you?
Yes.
You're recognized.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to know from the speaker, what's your name again?
Mike Ferris.
Mr. Ferris, esoterically, does liberty outweigh freedom?
I think they're synonymous.
How would you address the issue of freedom with respect to the southern states of the United States, where this issue was presented legislatively in the 1860s? And the issue was then liberty versus freedom. And it was the freedom of people of my hue. And that was determined by a civil war and also by national legislation that is now enforced, or at least set forth in the United States Constitution. Would you give the states the authority that they were seeking in 1861?
No.
Well, why not?
Why not? Because there are certain principles, in that particular question, maybe I misunderstood what the intent behind your question at first.
Let me explain. Let me explain.
Okay.
The question is, the arguments then were that the states should be at liberty to do what they want, and they could treat slaves any way they wanted to, and they could view them as property.
Right.
And the founders of this country saw fit to treat certain people as property and did not deal with that in the original Constitution. So the issue then was liberty versus the freedom of a people. So how would you address that?
The equality of every human being is an innate truth that was stated in the Declaration of Independence, was not delivered until we had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And those amendments were essential to making this country be a just nation. Our nation should not pursue one goal over others. There are balancing principles and balancing truths. Freedom is an important process. Freedom is an important agenda. Equality is an important agenda. Federalism is an important agenda. Freedom of speech. I'm a First Amendment litigator. I do religious freedom cases. Religious freedom is not absolute. People don't have a right in the name of religion to do child sacrifice or any other number of crazy things. And so our nation was out of balance in that prior to the Civil War on the issues of treating the humanity of every human being, the fundamental equality of every human being. And I do not believe, and I have a track record to prove it, of standing in favor of racial equality, having done race discrimination cases myself as a litigator.
Follow up on that. This nation also declared at its beginning, either de facto or in writing, that women were inferior to men. There was a question of the liberty of the states to make that decision, as over against the freedom of the people who were being adversely labeled and otherwise diminished due to gender. Do you really want to come across as an absolutist in terms of granting liberty without and allowing the states to individually make judgments about how much freedom women may have?
Representative Walker, I have no desire to repeal the 19th Amendment or the 13th Amendment or the 14th Amendment. There's no political will to do so. And there's no effort to do that. And I think that the beauty of our country is the balance of power. And so you're raising instances where the balance of power was needed to be, and none of those things got corrected by the federal government. I would just stand, they got corrected by constitutional reforms, and you don't make constitutional reforms by the federal government. Congress had to act, and 3/4 of the states had to ratify that. And so that's not an act of the federal government. Constitutional actions are not, it's actions technically by the people. And the way that is done is by 2/3 of both houses of Congress, or by, and then by 3/4 of the state legislatures, or by 2/3 of all the states, and then by 3/4 of the state legislatures. And so these are organic acts of the people. Those weren't acts of Congress alone. They had to have the state legislatures to pass the 13th, the 14th, the 15th, the 19th amendments.
But it took a president of the United States and a civil rights movement to have laws enacted by a legislature, which were generally opposed by the people in the southern parts of the United States, to enforce the right to vote, which was then in the Constitution as a consequence of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. So you would want to have us go back as a nation to that?
No, not in the slightest. The 15th Amendment and the Voting Rights Act are lawful enactments under the provision. They don't depend on the General Welfare Clause or the Commerce Clause for the source of their authority. They depend on the 15th Amendment's enforcement clause. And so I have no desire to go back to that. And just because we want to restore education decision-making or other kinds of decision-making on various issues doesn't mean, at the state level, doesn't mean we want to restore all decision-making at the state level. I have no intention. No one has. There's no political will to do that. And what's theoretically possible. It's theoretically possible for them to use the federal government to take away everything that this state does. And I think stating the case in the extreme on either side is simply not realistic nor fair to the advocates of either position. I don't think people who advocate a strong federal government advocate eliminating the states entirely, nor do people like me who want to advocate for a balance, a reshuffle of the balance of federalism, believe that you take away all federal authority, including the ability of the 14th Amendment. Stating this case in the extremes is not fair, frankly.
Thank you very much. We've got several more questions.